The hospital's bright lights made the bruises look even worse. "We need to examine her alone," the doctor said firmly, stepping between the mother and her child. "Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from." The woman froze, heart pounding, as the words sank in. She felt powerless, as if her love could suddenly count for nothing. In that moment, it seemed clear that caring with all your strength can feel like it's not enough to keep your child safe in your arms. What led them here began much earlier, during what should have been an ordinary morning pickup after a simple sleepover. The car seat buckles clicked into place as the mother leaned over to adjust her daughter's jacket sleeve. That was the first moment she saw them. 3 faint marks across the child's forearm, each the size of a fingertip. "What happened here, sweetheart?" Her thumb brushed lightly over the discolored skin. The girl only shrugged, legs swinging. "We played rough at Lily's house." By the time they reached the school drop-off lane, rain was tapping against the windshield. The teacher bent to lift the backpack from the back seat, then froze. Her eyes traveled to the wrist, lingering on the bruises. Under the fluorescent lights, the marks looked darker. Yellow edges, faint purple centers. Something that might be shrugged off at home no longer looked so simple in that sterile glow. Moments later, the intercom crackled above the hallways. Classroom doors shut quickly, the hushed sound of locks sliding into place. The mother gripped her coffee cup as the rushed stillness of the building set in. Teachers avoided her gaze. The nervous energy of the moment spoke louder than any official explanation. The school was following its protocol for suspected abuse. Uniformed officers appeared at the front entrance, joined by child protection staff carrying clipboards. The mother stood helpless, watching children ushered away from windows as if danger were already at the door. When the principal finally approached, her folded arms left little room for comfort. "We've called the hotline," she said plainly. Inside the office beyond her shoulder, the girl sat on a chair that seemed too large for her, small fingers gripping the edge as her lower lip trembled. Her eyes widened when she spotted her mother through the glass, a wordless plea hanging in the space between them. A secretary's hurried voice carried down the hall. "Yes, 3 distinct marks on the left arm." Each description seemed to harden the event into a case file, stripping it further from simple explanation. The mother pressed her palm against the pane as another staff member stepped forward, guiding the child into a side room. It was explained as their usual practice, to speak with a child apart from the waiting adults. The little girl turned as she walked, searching her mother's face. The scent of lemon cleaner drifted faintly from behind that door, blending with the sterile edge of the office. It was in that charged stillness that the next stage began. The interview room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the mother sat across from 2 social workers. One scribbling notes across a long form, the other holding a paper that carried the weight of authority. "Your daughter mentioned falling off a bunk bed," the younger one said without looking up. "That usually leaves 1 large bruise, not several small ones. Many areas have hotlines for suspected abuse, and when a call comes in, the response can be quick." The mother pressed her palms against the table, steadying her voice as she repeated the story. The sleepover, the superhero games, her daughter's sensitive skin. The workers exchanged clipped glances. Their training pressed them to assume risk first, to protect the child even before proof was clear. From the hallway, her daughter's sharp cry carried into the room, familiar, raw, impossible not to recognize. The sound clenched her shoulders. The older worker closed his folder gently. "She'll be kept under temporary care for evaluation," he explained. The mother shifted as if to rise, but the officer against the doorframe didn't move, his square stance a reminder of the limits around her. Once those steps were in motion, she found it almost impossible to stop the process. Her fingers trembled as she signed her name on a form that felt heavier than paper should. The carbon copy smelled of fresh toner, sharp in her nose. Her own fingerprints were pressed into black ink as part of the intake process. When she asked again when she could see her daughter, the answer came quietly. After her interview. No one said how long that might be. Through office windows fogged by rain, she caught sight of her daughter being led outside. The child's palms pressed flat against the glass of a van, eyes rimmed red from crying. The mother mouthed words of comfort, knowing they couldn't be heard. Staff called it a necessary step, moving children quickly before any second-guessing could interfere. Inside, A stapled packet was slid across the table. Visitation rolls, written in careful blocks. And a court date, set within days. To her, the days stretched like forever. The workers packed up their folders, already turning to the next case, while her phone buzzed in her pocket, carrying a different kind of scrutiny waiting just beyond those walls. Outside the office, her phone lit up with the first ripple of what would come next. A blurry photo posted in a local parenting forum. Her face was half hidden, but the caption was clear enough. Anyone know this mom? 7-year-old removed from school today after teacher noticed suspicious bruises. Beneath it, comments stacked quickly, voices she didn't know speculating about her character, filling in blanks with rumor. By midday, the same image had already traveled across neighborhood feeds. The account tagged as concerned educator added a line that sank her stomach. Can't share details, but this isn't the first time. The replies grew harsher, themes of fear, pressure that she be reported, whispers about her job and her home. Scrolling through them felt like watching sparks land across dry grass, one after another. Kids fall down, she thought helplessly, but no one online seemed willing to say it. Her manager's voice cut through on the next call. People are reaching out, he admitted, strained. He explained that community members were pressing the preschool about keeping her on staff. The conversation ended with words that landed like a closing door. We may need you on leave until this clears. At the store that night, she felt the shift in ways no screen could prepare her for. A shopper veered their cart down another aisle. The cashier, who had known her since high school, could barely meet her eye, mumbling about a system glitch as hands shook slightly while bagging groceries. The chill of being avoided followed her out to the parking lot. By dusk, a news van angled for a shot of her front steps. Online, a Nextdoor thread had already shared a photo where her address peeked clear in the background. Her phone vibrated nonstop, numbers she didn't recognize flashing and fading until her chest felt tight. Some messages wished her harm. Others offered sympathy that only deepened her sense of isolation. If this part resonates with you, leave a comment. It helps others feel seen. Long before any official word came forward, the story had already hardened into local truth. The next morning would show her how quickly whispers online become walls in real life. The playground told the story before anyone spoke. Children who once tumbled together on the same climbing frame now found their mothers tugging them away. One woman pulled her son's arm back when he lifted a hand to wave, a sharp, silent gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. Later that afternoon, the phone buzzed with a message from her daughter's closest friend's mom. It was clipped and polite at first. A playdate postponed. Then, in a second burst of text, the kind no one wants to send, came. Maybe it's best if the girls take some time apart. The mother stared at the screen until the glow dimmed, then set it down on the counter as if even touching it hurt. Small transactions in familiar spaces started to feel like performances. At the grocery store, her cashier fumbled through a stack of cards and tapped at the register before finally mumbling, "The system's acting up today." The excuse was meant lightly, but the line behind her seemed to stiffen, customers staring at their shoes as though proximity might burn. By Sunday morning service, the changes were no longer subtle. Parishioners shuffled across pews when she entered, leaving gaps like careful borders. The pastor's wife gave a tight smile, one that ended before reaching her eyes. On the bulletin board, her daughter's artwork had been covered by a folded flyer, its tape still fresh when she peeled it back. On Monday, even neighbors changed course. A man who once borrowed her lawnmower crossed the street early, as if schedules suddenly demanded a shortcut. Her daughter noticed before she did. The little hand in hers squeezed harder. "Why won't Mr. Dan talk to us anymore?" the child asked, swinging their arms with more force, searching her mother's face for an answer. Each encounter was a small fracture. Together, they traced out a larger picture. A town quietly agreeing on truths not yet spoken aloud. By now, the community had already decided a story for them. And while the mother braced against those silent verdicts, another test loomed. One where her daughter's own voice would be placed beneath careful scrutiny. The forensic interviewer's office had shelves crowded with stuffed animals and a child-sized table scattered with crayons. The girl fidgeted on a chair too big for her, the scent of disinfectant sharp in the air. The interviewer crouched to her level and asked gently, "Can you tell me how you got those marks on your arm?" She twisted the hem of her shirt and glanced at the glass window, aware of shapes moving on the other side. "We were being superheroes," she said. The room stayed quiet until she added, "Lily's bunk bed was the tallest tower in the kingdom." With her hands, she showed how they climbed, capes dragging, how they pretended to soar before the blankets tangled around their feet. Forensic interviewers often watch for consistent details, but children under stress can tell the same memory a little differently each time. In her first description, she said they fell onto carpet. Later, she corrected to the hard floor. The caseworker's pen paused mid-sentence. A sideways glance between two adults looked to the mother like doubt taking root. From her seat outside, she noticed the girl's shoes scraping against the chair legs, the hunch of her shoulders as if bracing against the brightness of the lights. Meanwhile, at the sleepover home, Lily drew her own picture in crayon. 2 stick figures with capes tumbling from a crooked rectangle. "That's us falling," she explained when an officer asked. "We weren't supposed to jump, but we did." Her mom turned pale when she realized the drawing itself was being collected as evidence. It took time before the home's video system was shared. When it finally reached the office, the short clip showed the girls wrestling and then wobbling off the bunk in a crash of tangled sheets. One landed hard on her arm. The timestamp aligned with a casual message Lily's mom had sent that night. She'd mentioned a little spill. Investigators replayed the blurry scene carefully, each time with more silence in the room. Professionals look for signs when a child has been coached. But these words carried the messy pauses of memory, not rehearsal. When the blankets themselves were produced from the laundry basket, still bunched in a knot, the picture became difficult to ignore. Even so, it wasn't a single detail that mattered. It was the weaving together of testimony, a friend's drawing, and those seconds of video. Only then did the pieces begin to tilt toward the truth. Yet, for the mother, this was only a beginning. Ahead waited an even heavier process, layered in paperwork and hearings, with decisions far beyond her control. The manila envelope arrived, heavy in her hands, thick with pages that promised no relief. At her side, the attorney adjusted his tie before explaining the path ahead. "Even with strong evidence," he said quietly, tapping the recording from the sleepover, "the process can move slowly." Court schedules shifted, hearings postponed, while her daughter's childhood kept moving forward without pause. Inside the courtroom, fluorescent lights hummed over polished wood. The state's attorney spoke with formal authority, flanked by caseworkers carrying thick binders. "Given the severity of the report," she pressed, "supervised visits may be necessary." The words struck like a physical blow. The mother gripped the table edge until her knuckles blanched. Her lawyer countered with everything they had gathered: the video, the pediatrician's note, the friend's drawing. Each piece was laid against doubt, as if building a fragile wall of truth, one stone at a time. Legal processes in these cases are complex. Records and reports may remain accessible to professionals for some time, even if the case is dismissed. The mother would come to realize this later, when her name surfaced in a registry check connected to a routine application. Her lawyer sighed when she called in panic, explaining only that clearing such records could take additional steps. The design aims to protect children, but for parents, it can feel like being caught inside machinery that does not easily slow down. If you or someone you know faces this, a qualified attorney can explain the local law and options in clear detail. When the judge finally ruled, he acknowledged the evidence and remarked on the gaps in reports, then lifted his glasses and said simply, "The child's safety must come first." The conclusion returned custody, but with conditions: scheduled visits by officials, ongoing oversight. The verdict landed as both relief and reminder. The shadow of suspicion would not vanish at once. Her attorney had urged her to build a paper trail as protection, so she bought a simple notebook. Each evening, she filled new lines: school pickup times, vitamins, meals, conversations with teachers. The act became ritual, part defense, part survival. And while the ink gathered on those pages, her daughter began expressing herself in another way, through small drawings that spoke more than words ever could. The weight of the ordeal settled in slowly, long after the court had finished with its files. The aftermath showed itself in quiet, everyday places, where the reminders could not be shut away. Their first morning back at school, the teacher bent close with a cheerful voice that sounded a little too practiced. "We're all so glad you're here," she said, her eyes flicking to the girl's bare arms. Nearby, the aide guided other children to play in small groups, leaving space that the little girl noticed at once. She clung to her mother's leg until the bell forced her to let go. At home, startled responses began weaving their way into simple moments. A clatter from the kitchen made the girl stiffen. The ping of a phone stretched her neck like she was bracing again for news. When the doorbell rang unexpectedly, she stopped, halfway down the staircase, holding still as though the floor itself was uncertain. These were not the movements of a child who had forgotten. The pediatrician described this as a common reaction to trauma, watching her flinch even at the touch of a stethoscope. The mother nodded, solemnly, already counting nights when sleep only came with the protection of a fortress made from every stuffed animal in the house. Therapies and breathing exercises were offered, but the mother understood that healing rarely followed a chart. Even after the school and officials said she could return, many neighbors remained hesitant. At the local playground, parents paused before sending their children closer. On the swing set, only one classmate, quiet and careful, sat beside her, moving gently so the chains creaked in unison. Late at night, the mother's notebook shifted purpose again. Where once it logged meals and visits, now it listed therapists, clinics that might take insurance, and school districts far enough away to promise a clean start. When she spoke of moving, her daughter simply packed her favorite clothes into a backpack, declaring, "We can go now." Even when paperwork says closed, trust can take far longer to return. If this part resonates with you, share a kind word below for families who've been through something similar. As the days stretched forward, the mother found herself watching more closely than she ever had before. Small checks, morning routines, the kinds of scars that don't always fade when the case file does. The morning light caught a faint mark on the little girl's wrist as her mother fastened her watch. The gesture had become ritual, almost like proof to herself that nothing new appeared overnight. 6 months later, the block party banner still waved on the street, but their corner stayed muted. Neighbors passed briskly, and the mother kept her focus on arranging cookies on a tray, her hands not quite steady. At the pediatrician's office, the nurse smiled while wrapping the blood pressure cuff. The hiss made the girl shrink back. She whispered, "Are they going to take me away again?" Her mother bent close, but found the words lodged in her throat, unsettled, as her eyes caught what looked like an alert still sitting inside the chart. Whether temporary or routine, it felt like the past shadowed every visit. School permission slips arrived in the mail, glossy and familiar. The mother paused over the emergency contact line, remembering what had happened with a casual signature the year before. Now, each blank space carried weight, the pen pressing hard enough that ink pooled at the edge of her name. Online, their story had not faded. The archive note read, "Case dismissed after review," yet below, comments still stacked. Strangers debated blurred photos and replayed details she hadn't lived inside their imaginations. For her, the permanence was not legal but digital, the feeling that no matter how far they moved forward, the record would remain clickable. In therapy sessions, the little girl built towers of blocks, only to wreck them with a sweep of her hand. "Sometimes bad things just happen," she said flatly. Her counselor nodded. The room's one-way glass reflected the mother's tired face back at her, seeing how closely she tracked new habits. Sleeping with the door propped just enough to feel air shift through the hallway. Social friction followed in quieter but sharper ways. At the grocery store, a manager lingered near their cart, eyes falling too long on what they bought. The mother left the basket by the cooler and guided her daughter out, the chill of judgment sharper than the winter air. By spring, the for sale sign settled into their lawn. Curtains across the street fluttered, but no one stepped closer. The moving truck hummed at the curb as her daughter clutched a folded field drawing on her lap, already imagining space beyond fences. They left, but the scars, some seen, some not, would follow. Protective systems aim to shield children, but mistakes can leave lasting harm. Compassion matters. On her last morning in that town, the mother noticed her daughter tracing a map of their new home. Not the house itself, but the wide margin of space around it. Distance had become its own kind of safety. Have you faced judgment without the full story? Share in the comments. You're not the only one who's weathered suspicion. If this story moved you, leave a supportive note. Those small gestures help real people. If you want more stories that look at how families and systems collide, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.